Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat. Mr. Paul Jarrett is in the house. Paul is owner and CEO at Bulu. Excited to talk business, Paul. Welcome to the
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me on, Chris. I've been looking forward to this, man.
Likewise. So you got an interesting story. We were just talking about this before I hit record.
Yep.
Now, you've had a lot of twists and turns in your business over the last
Absolutely.
years. Before we get to the fun stuff, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, well, it's probably a little bit of a cliche, but I grew up as a poor kid in a trailer park in Nebraska. And, always wanted the Nike Air Jordans sort of thing. And
Same.
really from, I would say probably right around third grade, I mean, my parents were just like, if you want brand name stuff, you're just going to have to figure out how to get it on your own. And started kind of, hustling at a young age, if you will. Started buying stuff at like local flea markets and, stuff like that. And I went to a Catholic school, so it's easy to sell like switchblades and stuff like that to the Catholic school kids, right? So from a really young age, I kind of learned how to purchase products and turn around and flip them and sell them. Parental advisory CDs were always a big deal, right? So a lot of rap, hip hop stuff. So, just always kind of from a young age was taught that if I want something, I have to figure out and go get it on my own. And then in college, kind of the same thing. I actually played at Iowa State University, played football there. Only way I was going to get into college was a full ride. So had to make that happen. So kind of went the sports direction. And then I gave it up. And then, I had a regular job, but the time kind of allowed me to figure out and learn eBay. So again, I was back like selling products, kind of marking things up and selling them. And then, as I got older, went to college, got into the advertising marketing arena, decided to go try to work for the best of the best, went to New York City, worked for the biggest, most highly awarded ad agency in the world. Then went to San Francisco and kind of worked out really big advertising agencies. And I tell people like the thing that I learned was that the people that are running the local lawn mowing business in the trailer park and the people in the boardrooms in New York City are real. There's not a lot that separates them, right? I always thought that like when I would get to that level in New York City that I'd be blown away in meetings, but it was just kind of the same thing of like people working hard to solve problems, right? And I think that experience really taught my wife and I, who my wife was also in the industry, two things. One, if you're going to work 80 hours, you better like get a piece of the pie, right? And two, like we learned that the only thing that was separating these people from working with big brands and making big dollars was almost just them deciding that they wanted to do those things. So while we were working in San Francisco, my wife and I were doing freelance, and we always thought we were going to start our own ad agency. And then one day we were running a half marathon and we got a bunch of samples at the end. And one thing led to another, and we came up with this idea called Bulu Box. And the whole concept, we were one of the very first subscription boxes. And the whole concept was people would sign up, they get 4 to 5 premium vitamin supplement samples, and then they could come back and buy full-size purchases from us. So we raised venture capital dollars. We raised $5.5 million. We grew that company. Everything was kind of going up and to the right. Pandemic hits, kind of a lot of chaos. And, I would just summarize it as investors wanted to do one thing and we wanted to do another. And we saw this opportunity in logistics. And in October of 2023, we bought the company out. And now we're like offering logistics to other companies. And we've grown from 8 clients at the beginning of the year to over 50. We own the company 100%. And it's just, it's a lot of hustle. And there's a lot of like twists and turns in that story. But, to kind of go from that young age of like learning how to hustle and learning my value to now the same thing with logistics and doing fulfillment and storing, packing, shipping, and getting people onto retail shelves. There's really not a lot of the difference of that same mentality, so I'm super grateful that my parents just kind of raised us with that mentality.
That's a great story. I love that because that was me too as a kid,
Yeah.
working for the neighbor, doing landscaping jobs and
Yep.
delivering newspapers and flipping stuff. I mean, that was fun back then.
Yeah.
But I'm curious because, like for you, for me, eBay was a thing in my 20s, probably even
Yeah.
in my teenage years a little bit. How did that experience and that platform dictate where you are now? I have to
Yeah.
imagine that had something to do with Bulu.
Massive. I would say the thing it taught me a few important things. One was you just had to get shipping as cheap as possible because it was just more. I mean, I remember going to I figured out when Walmart was throwing their cardboard boxes out, and I'd drive around back and go steal all their cardboard boxes because that's a lot of money if you're buying cardboard boxes retail versus just stealing them out of a dumpster. So that I feel what our clients feel when it comes to shipping and how it feels to save that 10 cents and how that adds up over time. So I'd say that's kind of a technical thing, but I'd say the biggest thing that I learned was a lot of the things that I sold on eBay, I was always shocked that people saw value in them.
Hmm.
Here I am in Nebraska and one of the things I was doing was I was cleaning houses and I was cleaning trailers of people that got evicted. And so I'd be the first person in there and I got to keep like whatever I wanted and trash the rest and finding out like how much you could sell fishing lures for or how much you could sell a used guitar for and really understanding that like the things that I assign value to aren't necessarily what other people assign value to and let the market dictate like what you want. And what's my favorite is I learned that um, by getting a tackle box and just showing a couple of the lures and then not showing everything as kind of like this mystery box, people would pay a lot more for those. And then same thing when we had Bulu box, which we were sampling vitamins and supplements. We wouldn't tell people exactly what they were going to get, and it caused this intrigue. So, but I think overall, just learning that, like, man, my assumptions for what people would pay for something or what's interesting to them, um, set those aside and let the market determine what it is, and really listen and pay attention to why people are doing what they're doing. That was probably the biggest two takeaways. Yeah, for sure.
No, it's funny you mentioned that. I've had these same conversations with my wife. If you ever sell anything on the marketplace or sell anything on eBay. But I think if you distill that down to marketing, what's really interesting to me is unless you are your target market, it is really hard to look at something and say, yeah, this is great. Well, if you're looking at your own marketing for Bulu or your own marketing for your business,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not your target market, it's really hard to say, yeah, this sounds great. This is compelling.
It is.
And I think sometimes that's why we need to have second party, third party feedback
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
have focus groups and things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, as you grew your business, how did you determine whether or not that this was the right move? And as you continue to pivot and iterate, how did you know that you were on the right path?
Yeah. It's I've this is one thing where it's funny because it almost used to be embarrassing, but now it's a badge of pride. And when we first started the company, we had our own sample box, and I thought we were going to be more of this like Joe Rogan bro box with like hardcore supplements and whatever. And like, guess what? That is not who was buying them. The people that were buying them were females that wanted to lose 20 pounds after having a baby, or they all wanted to fit into like their high school jeans. So we very quickly tweaked that. But the only way that we found that out was by talking to our customers and just seeing weight loss over and over again. And also 80% of the subscribers, I swear, were named Jennifer. I don't know why.
Yes.
It must have been a popular name in that year. But as we grew, we actually got pretty stagnant. And one of the things that we did was we started making subscription boxes for companies like Disney, GNC, Clorox. So not only did we have our own, but we were doing them for other people. And the thing that I learned in that process was these brands were contacting us. And really, once I learned that these brands were contacting us because they had to innovate, because they were tasked with innovation at Disney or at GMC or wherever. And I kept trying to think of what is the problem, because every time you find like a hard problem to solve and you can offer that solution, like that is my sweet spot. And that's where I think the core of a lot of great marketing lives, actually. And I remember I kept trying to make it a one size fits all subscription boxes for these companies. And then it dawned on me one day when I was meeting with a guy from Clorox, because he was really nervous and he's in this new position. I thought, oh my gosh, this guy is terrified of getting fired.
Hmm.
And I said, hey, how about this? Like, we will build this subscription box out for you. And if it goes terrible, you can just blame us and fire us. And it just like his light bulb went off. And that actually became the pitch and how we closed so many of these big brands. Is I went to the heads of innovation. And I said, like, the nice thing about us is, you're not going to lose your job. You can just blame us and fire us. And that was solving a problem for a lot of them, which the problem was fear, right? But it took us a long time to figure out if we wanted to do it and how to scale that business. And then the interesting thing is when we bought the business in October of 2023, we really weren't sure what we were going to do. So I went back to a strategy that I have ever since trying to find my first, actually get a college scholarship, get an internship. Anytime I've really been stuck, I always find myself calling as many people as I can, that, people that I want to be like other football players or other people that had internships. And when we bought the business, we had this huge warehouse, we had all these assets, but we really didn't know what we were going to do with it. Were we going to make our own product? Were we going to keep doing subscription boxes for other brands? And what I did, and this was a little bit of what the founder of Yex.com, which is a multi-billion-dollar company, what he taught me, mixed with what I learned along the way. But he had this big thing, and what I did was create multiple decks, right? And I created these decks, and I would call up consumer packaged goods brands, and I was essentially selling them, even though the thing didn't really exist, right? And I would tell them at the end, like, hey, this is actually kind of like what we're thinking about doing. But after you start to get to 50 to 100 to 150, and you're tweaking your deck along the way, I found that by the time we got to about 200 of these worst sales calls ever, right? We knew exactly what we were going to do, which was we found a really simple problem that I couldn't believe that the market had. And I never would have guessed it or figured it out. But most companies that do storage, packing, shipping like what we do, they only provide it for either B2B retail stores or D2C going direct to consumer homes. And we said, hey, when we worked with Disney and GNC, we learned how to ship both directly to the stores and to customer homes. Like, is that the thing that people want? And as soon as we started offering that to people and we said, hey, you can store, pack, ship with us, and we can go to retail or we can go to customers' homes, it doesn't matter. And you don't have to split up your inventory. It was just one after the other. And we grew from 8 to 50 clients. And it was so simple. And if you would have told me it, well, one, I would have never thought of it because it was so in front of us. Two, if you would have told me, I would have told you you were an idiot. But because we made those phone calls and we couldn't believe it, it was like we went the other way. Instead of making our product or service more complex, we stripped it down to like the simplest thing. And it really allowed us to build our marketing message around it and really like hit the ground running. So yeah, just talking to so many people in the industry, it's almost like creating your own word cloud in your mind, right? And having that deck and just tweaking it. But I will say it feels like I spent about 6 months calling people back and saying like, sorry, I sounded like an idiot. We were kind of trying to figure out what we were selling, right? But a lot of people appreciated the honesty.
That's amazing. You said a couple of things that really stood out to me there. Number one, you were operating scared. And
Yeah.
it's okay to admit that because I
Right.
think a lot of us do. I've
Yeah.
always said you shouldn't operate scared, but you
Right.
didn't know what you were going to do, which
Yep.
is very surprising that someone would buy a company and not really know. But I
Yeah.
would say in times of disparity in my career where I didn't have a plan, I didn't know what to do, I was maybe borderline desperate.
Yeah.
One of the things I always did was I picked up the phone. I was
Yeah.
scheduling one-to-ones. And
Yeah.
it was nothing more than, going back to the well and making sure that, you had these relationships, you could ask for feedback. You could talk about where you're at. You could talk about where they're at. And it's amazing how if you have enough of those conversations, it pays dividends.
Absolutely.
It never hurts to cultivate relationships with whether it's prospects, clients, or anywhere in between. And that maybe that's a valuable lesson that people need to hear, especially from you, Paul. So kudos to you for that.
Oh,
But I'm curious, when you went back, was there any pushback? What was that like?
like when I called people back,
Yeah,
hey,
I got the
I think,
solution. I've got the solution.
yeah. I think most people were kind of like, I don't even remember what you were selling to me,
So,
which was like kind of a relief, right?
thanks.
And then a lot of people were almost like pulling for me because, I was able to tell them like, hey, here's what happened. We were in a rough negotiation for 10 years. We kind of shot out of the other end, not thinking we are going to buy the company. We had a small window to make a decision. We got it. I came to you guys kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what works because I was terrified and I was scared. But here's what we figured out, and almost like bringing them along the journey. I always tell people, I'm credited a lot with like having good sales tactics and marketing tactics, and I tell people like one of the things that I always think about is any client or any potential client or any sale, it always feels like this role of like one person is the player and one person is the coach, and the coach is yelling at the player, like kind of back and forth. And I always think, how do I become a teammate where I'm putting my arm around the person and I'm like, hey, we're in this together. Like you want to do this thing, I want to do this thing. Like, don't make it a coach player relationship.
Right.
Let's make it like a teammate relationship. And I think so many people want to be part of a comeback story, or so many people want to be part of a team or a tribe, that if you can make them feel like they're included in that journey, which takes a lot of authenticity. It takes a lot of, swallowing your pride and getting over your ego. And a lot of them, I found like they went to bat for you. They love the story so much. And they're like, man, now you have this thing and you have this amazing pitch deck. Like, I want to go share your story with other people. So I think that whole, you know, by just using that honesty, that authenticity, being vulnerable and coming back to them, a lot of them appreciated it. But I'd say for the most part, a lot of people, they didn't care because they didn't remember what I said anyway, which was also a total relief, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting also, you mentioned something about just calling CPGs.
Yeah.
That takes some audacity in a way because there's a lot of gatekeepers. That's not something that's easy to do. So how did you break through on a task that, seems so big and could potentially be stressful and cause
Yeah.
burnout because they're going to get a lot of no's along the way.
You're going to get, you know, I, 9 out of 10 no's is really the statistic. And I think that, it's the same way. Everybody's like, how did you ever work with Disney? I'm like, I picked up the phone. Like, how did you work with GNC? Or I picked up the phone. But here's what they don't know is I picked up the phone to 300 brands, right? And Disney just happened to say yes, right? So I've just always had these, even when we raised capital, I remember other entrepreneurs were like, man, I pitched 50 times and I got one person interested. And I thought, okay, well, if I pitch 100 times, I'm going to get two people interested. Well, if I pitch 300 times, like what happens? And so I kind of feel like I developed, whether it was looking for a scholarship or looking for an internship or whatever it was that I was doing in my life. I got really used to being told no. I mean, even when I was doing like classified sales or display ads, but I always just had this mindset of 1 out of 100 people will say yes to me. What's it going to take? And if I talk to 200 or 300 or 400 people, then I'm just going to have more yeses, right? And so I think that out of all the success that we've had and, growing 50 clients and, uh, we had this stat this year, um, out of 50 new clients this year, it took us 540 meetings of 1 hour meetings to land those 50. And that doesn't even count the outbound calls and all of that stuff. So That was just 540 times. I was pretty much on the phone for an hour pitching our company, and 50 came out of that. So
Wow.
yeah,
It's interesting. Our co-founder, Dustin, who's usually on these shows with us, he often says that when it comes to sales, it's really not so much a how game, it's more of a numbers game.
sure.
And
I agree.
at the end of the day, it's like, are we picking up the phone enough? Are we doing enough outbound emails? Are we doing enough cold outreach? Whatever it is.
Yep.
And eventually you do enough and you get to that. And hopefully, as you've documented, you learn along the way, you iterate, you just get better and better
Yes.
and better. And hopefully you have the mentality or the mindset where you can look back and be like, whoa, I really sucked those first couple. That was really bad. It's
If
embarrassing.
you
Thank God
don't
they
look,
forgot about me.
if you don't look back like every year or at least every 5 years and don't laugh at yourself, like you're not getting better. And by doing all those calls and those meetings, I mean, you actually start to learn like what are good jokes, what's your inflection, what are they going to say, and that's actually how I think people become really great at sales. I mean, some people have a knack for it. But I would say that, anybody can be great at sales if you just make enough phone calls, because you just kind of figure out that format. But yeah, you should always look back. I chuckle now because I'm just thinking like last year at this time, like, how far off we were. And, just today alone, we had an old contact from like 10 years ago called, and we like closed a huge deal in like a 30-minute call just because, we've done the blocking and tackling for so long. So yeah, but it's cringy when I think back to, a year ago or so long, but that's a good thing.
So from the days where you started working in the company to now, what does the business look like? How does it operate different? And what have you done to get it to that point?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Man, in the early days, I was the worst micromanager into every single facet of everything. I did everything. It was definitely not doable. And I burnt out after about 3 or 4 years, pretty bad. And, I did the thing where I picked up the phone and called a bunch of happy entrepreneurs that had time. And I remember I got to about 43 of them that I called. And one thing that I heard out of a lot of them was this, it's called EOS Worldwide, or Entrepreneurial Operating
I
System.
know
I
all
don't know if
about
you're
it. Love it.
familiar. Yeah. And boy, I drank the Kool-Aid on that. And, what we found was over 12 years, the years that we have a coach and we implement EOS, those years are always just so much better. And over the years, I've gone from like this crazy micromanager, and really, I would say like utilizing EOS in the beginning, we went so hardcore by the book. But I would say now we just use a few of their tools. We use about 5 of their tools, but our leadership team and our team really understands what accountability means, which I think is the main thing about the book, is like you need to have accountability.
Yeah.
And so now, I mean, I'm accountable for probably, I'm accountable for 5 things, but really like only 2 of them are kind of challenging to me. But, stepping back and letting go of the reins and hiring really smart people, people smarter than I am, and making them accountable for those things, it's night and day. And it's wild to think now that like, I'm, like today, like I'm going to go home early, right? Like, I'm like, that's crazy because I was working until, 3 in the morning and whatever. But, and it takes a while to get to that point. And I think it's a combination of, pushing the ball forward on, your good product or service in different categories. But I would say EOS was the number one thing that kind of allowed me to step back, but also really looking at other entrepreneurs and those ones that were like going on vacation and had money and were happy, and going like, I remember I was talking to one guy and I was like, man, so you people don't have to come to you for passwords and copies of the keys? And he's like, no. And do you think they do that with Steve Jobs or like Elon Musk? He's like, you need to like let that go, And but yeah, I really credit that whole book series and that operating methodology with almost giving me permission to step back. And what we learned was we were doing way too much. We had way too in-depth a process. We were focused on the wrong things. And, now it's like we meet up Monday, we look at our KPIs, we fix stuff, and it's almost a little bit too smooth now, but that's how it should be if you do things right.
It's amazing. I wish someone would have given me the EOS platform in high school.
Yeah,
It's
right.
almost like when you know that, you look
Yes.
back and you're like, what should they teach in high school? Well, they should teach financial literacy,
Yep.
and they should teach that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's so important.
My wife, who, we founded the company together. I happen to be married to the other co-owner, right? But we use EOS for our life stuff, right? And when we put together like our vision of, when we wanted to buy a house and, so many things, and it really helped a lot of getting on the same page of even like, how many kids do you want to have and when do we want to have them and when does it make sense? And, a lot of those, almost all the things that we've put down that seemed impossible, like we ended up getting, it a lot of times isn't in the time frame that you want, but it just helped us both paddle in the right direction.
I love that.
Yeah.
Um, I We've had a couple EOS implementers on the show. We also had Mike Patton on the show. We got to talk about it, and really was enlightening. I mean, I've read most of the books now, and I don't care if you're just an employee, you're never going to be an entrepreneur, or if you're just a leader, or if you are a business owner. There are so many things there that can
Yeah.
be used. And one of
Yeah.
the things I found was, even though these books are not related, I read them in about the same time frame, which was 10x is easier than 2x, and then Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. Those flow together extremely well because, like you said, the big takeaway for me was, not only should I be okay with that, but it is healthy for me and healthy for people who work for me and healthy for the entirety of the business that I'm not doing everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and when you think about where you want your business to go and where it can go, when you start to remove yourself from all the different facets that you're in, which is probably most of them, if not all, um, all of a sudden that theory of like going from 2x to 10x, it not only seems simple, it seems like easy. And why shouldn't I have been doing this a decade ago? And that's
Right.
I think why people get excited about the EOS
Yeah. I
stuff.
always think about, people always ask like it's like this question of like, if you could go back and start your business over, like, what do you wish you would have told yourself or whatever? And I always think about like, um, I didn't know how to think big when we first started. And EOS, I think, in kind of 10xing things and systems and processes is what really like helped me like kind of think of like, whoa, I can have it all, and we can do these things. And, then even like converting to like, well, do I even want to do that thing? Like now I have
Right.
the confidence that I know I can do it, but like, is that actually what I want? But yeah, I always look back and I'm like, it's amazing how even, launching a little subscription box seemed like the biggest thing in the world. And, now we could do that on a Tuesday and be done, within 30 days. So.
That's cool. Well, let's talk about that. We haven't had a chance to get into the subscription box fulfillment/business.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about how that's evolved, because I remember a decade plus, that was all the rage. I mean, there were
Yeah.
businesses on Shark Tank, and we've seen some of that go away, but I mean, there are still companies out there doing it in various capacities, as you've already mentioned. What does this business and this industry look like now?
Yeah, I would say, when we first started, we were the sixth subscription box, and it took us a while, but we quickly realized that, you know, what a subscription box is it's just multiple barcoded items shipped together on a recurring basis. And when we first started, we went to work with they're called 3PLs, or a fulfillment company. And the first one we worked with, there was no kind of technology or system to do a subscription, let alone something that, had to be a kit, multiple items together in one. And then we went to a second one and we grew so quickly that we crushed them and, really messed with your customers. So in the process of looking for a third fulfillment company, we just decided to start doing it ourselves and kind of never found the fulfillment company that could do it. So what was interesting is the problem that we're actually solving 12 years later is the problem that we didn't know that we had in the very beginning, which is being able to ship to retail, to customers' homes, and not just ship there, but ship subscriptions, ship multiple varied items, ship complex things. And so what's interesting about the logistics arena, and one thing I left out is in those 12 years, we actually built and sold a software. It's called rangeme.com now, but we're kind of a CPG tech folks that almost identified logistics as like, there's a lot of opportunity in logistics. And I think the thing that it's almost painful to say, but the logistics industry really hasn't changed that much in the last 10 years. And I get in a lot of arguments with people because everybody wants to think it's a super tech savvy, we have all these things and whatever. But the reality is you can have more software and you can have more um, hardware, you can have robotics and all that stuff. But if the people on the floor that are doing the work don't understand the thing, like it's not going to happen. So we kind of intentionally got into the logistics industry because we saw the opportunity there. And I would say that there's a lot of green pasture for us to kind of build a software, or maybe we like create a product. So when we're doing this kind of like fulfillment logistics game, like that's just the thing that makes us money. What we're really doing is like we're using it to find a problem that's really big and tough and hard. And maybe we'll build our software someday, or maybe we'll launch a product. But I think people would be shocked at how this industry and a couple of other industries. I mean, I always look at like healthcare, like, man, that hasn't changed at all. There's a lot of things that people have tried, but there's a lot of industries, I think of like accounting and finance, more of the traditional businesses. A lot of people like to think they've changed, but if you actually get on the ground floor and you look at it, it hasn't really changed that much. And so I'm excited about our industry, and we're considered like the tech savvy new kids on the block and I know we scare
It's
like a
cool.
lot of people with what we do. And so, some of the things that we're going to launch pretty soon are really cool, like some vision and AI things. And, to us, they're not that cutting edge, but when it comes to the industry, it's very, very cutting edge. So yeah, I don't want to give it away, but I always think of like software developers and I'm like, man, if you could get a really good software team and actually put them in a warehouse, like, and they would learn that you need to get the people on the floor bought in. That's actually how you make change in this industry. So
I couldn't agree with that more. I'm
yeah,
already kind of reading the tea leaves here, what you're saying, but it's exciting, no doubt. I'm really curious. You talk about the buy-in. How do you do that with such a big facility and so many people?
yeah,
That can't be easy to get people of various levels, from
yeah,
entry level roles that are high churn all the
yep,
way up to your VPs and your leadership team.
yeah. I would say that the thing that I learned kind of just along the way of hiring is I still do a lot. I mean, I can't help it. I'm always scouting for managers and directors and VPs. Like if you are, a bartender or a waitress or something, like I am examining you for like, potential place in our company. And I think one thing that we've never been shy to do is we'll reach out and we'll call people that are, the CEOs of hospitals or wherever, because I think we were shocked to learn how many people actually dislike their job and they're willing to go work somewhere else. And so pretty early on, we learned how to almost, I don't want to use the word poach, but like we go after people that we want, because we made the mistake in the beginning of kind of hiring who would work for us. But once we had this change in mindset of like, hey, you know, this is a great place to work. We pay well. It's a great culture. Actually, a lot of people would be lucky to work here. Once we had that like kind of change in mentality, we were able to recruit a lot of people. And then I would say, interesting enough, um, when you find kind of an area to recruit people or kind of a mindset, um, you you should really focus on that and try to grow and foster that. And I will forever remember one day I used to be a big CrossFitter, right? And I was doing CrossFit and I was going to 5 a.m. classes and I was watching this person and she's coaching. And I thought, man, if she can get this group of 50 meatheads to pay attention, like, wouldn't she be great on the floor, like as a manager, right? And so, lo and behold, a couple of years into it, I said, hey, I have a position, a warehouse. It's actually a lot of like counting boxes is the same as counting reps and this and that and the other thing. And so we actually ended up finding like amazing people. If we find like a CrossFitter coach, like you're probably going to get a job offer from us. And it really helped us find like really good leaders. Like if you can lead a gym well and you could lead a group well, odds are you're going to do well here. So I think that by a lot of like trial and error, but a lot of like going after people that you would be surprised would work for you. But then we just really kind of used our brains and went, hey, this is a physical job. It's on the floor. It's coaching people, which that all equates to like hiring amazing leaders and managers and making sure they're very clear on what their position is. And then honestly, like getting out of the way and being okay when they make mistakes. But man, it is all about hiring. At the end of the day, it's like the people, right? Like that is actually what matters. And yeah, we compared to a lot of people in our industry, the dirty secret is we save a ton of money on HR because we don't have a lot of problems. And a lot of warehouses that have hundreds of people, they have all sorts of crazy problems. And I think by hiring the right people, we've avoided a lot of those things.
That's awesome. As I hear you talk about your business and not just that response, but previous responses, one thing just kind of appears to be evident is that not as much about innovation, it's more about differentiation.
Yeah,
And, you talk about greener pastures
you're
or
good. You're
blue
smart.
oceans,
You're
as some
good.
people call them. But I think when it comes down to it, you don't have to be 1000% different. You don't have to have AI when no one has AI. It's great to do things differently, but at the end of the day, it's how do you market or position yourself as being
Yes.
different? And clearly you're doing that with a lot of your recruiting and hiring process. And I just think that's what's really important. And also, I would argue what's missing with a lot of small to medium sized businesses out there, don't you think?
I'm, I'm amazed that you've picked up on that. I don't
I'm a
think
marketer.
that,
That's why I say that.
yeah, like you kind of blew my mind, that you picked up on that. And I would say, we've done the thing where we've raised capital and we've built something that kind of the market wasn't quite ready for, which is like the worst feeling ever. Right. And I would say that, I've got way too much, credit or attention with, being like a brilliant marketer or being innovative or whatever. And I think that, I mean, the book, what was it, Red Water, Blue Water, or Red Water, whatever. But the concept of red water is where the sharks are. It's where they're all feeding. Like, why would you want to be in that? Like, kind of swim towards blue water. I think about that in every single facet of our business. And I think so many people, they look at the leader in the industry or maybe like your city of like who's hiring well and who's whatever, and they try to be like that thing, right? They try to compete with it, or they try to be something of like what their concept of that thing is. And I've just, really come to learn over the years is, we can be the exact same type of fulfillment 3PL company as everybody else. And then let's just like turn a little bit this direction and always swim towards that blue water. And what's cool is like we've seen a lot of people copying us, which a lot of people hate. And, people
It's the
think
greatest compliment.
it's a huge compliment. It helps us realize we're doing the right thing and it helps us kind of swim in the right direction. And I think when you take that attitude towards hiring, like we can do the same things that everybody else is doing. Let's just switch the benefits a little bit here, right? Or, let's pay on some performance or just switch it. And I think a lot of people, it makes them feel more comfortable with the business and excited because it's not too far off of what they're doing. And even like I go back to like subscription boxes, right? Like those are just, book of the month club was around for 100 years plus,
Yep.
right? Like Sears and Roebucks were doing.
Columbia House.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then it was just a little bit different and said in a different way. and all of a sudden people get like really excited about it. So that's cool that you picked up on it. Yeah.
Well,
And
one of the things
it's
I've
terrible
always
when you
said,
get too far out of the way though.
yeah, I mean, I've always said this, like, look, you can try to emulate all these other bigger businesses that you want to be like or that you've idolized for a long time, industry leaders. But at the end of the day, the more you're like another business or all the other businesses, you're just a commodity. And if
Yep.
you're a commodity, how are you going to stand out and rise above the noise?
Yep.
It's just like fast food. Well, to me, they're almost all the same. I
Yeah.
mean, except for maybe Culver's and Chick-fil-A. I mean, there's more and more unique fast food companies now there was 10 years ago.
Right.
But if you zoom out, like how many of them are not just another McDonald's or just another Subway? It's like,
Get
well,
their food off the same truck.
go ahead and swim in that red ocean with the sharks all you want. But if you really want to innovate, start swimming toward those blue waters. But I
So
digress. We're very
no,
much
that's awesome.
aligned
I
on
love
that, and
that
I
you
love to
picked
hear
up
it.
on that.
Yeah. Well, before we disconnect here, let's talk a little bit more about Bulu, some of the things that the company offers, and what's going on over there right now.
Yeah, well, we're really excited because we've, really found our place in this market, and we're at the point now where, we offer this store pack shipping just like a lot of other people in our industry. But because we've connected APIs and built APIs, we really allow people to sell, to the stores, to customers' homes through social media. We've seen a lot of like live e-commerce selling, like that's getting really popular.
Yeah.
And we have a YouTuber, Ryan Trahan, and he sells Joyride candies, which is massive, massive. Yeah.
We
There's
know
a
all
few
about
other.
him in our house. Our kids, we just bought the joy rides for the first time.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
they're
came from
good.
us. Yeah. What's funny is we had no idea who he was, and then my kids went bananas, and they were like, do you know who that is? And boy, I'll tell you what. Like, we got a couple of YouTubers now, and it's unbelievable the numbers that they can pull just by promoting it a little bit. So I think we're really now this year, people understand like who we are and the type of companies that are working with us. And there are a lot of forward thinking consumer packaged goods companies. And fortunately now, we're in the position now where we get to kind of decide, are we going to expand? Are we going to buy another facility, maybe acquire another facility, which we've done two already this year, which is something that I never thought that we would do, let alone in such a short amount of time. But I think after negotiating for 2 years and then launching the business and kind of like filling up some of our facilities, my wife and I are actually trying to, and I don't think it's going to happen, but like we're hopeful. We're trying to have a little bit of a chill 2025, which is like, like weird for either one of us to say, but we kind of want to be able, and we've been doing it more, but we've done so much in the past couple of years. And if you're in logistics and you went through the
But
pandemic, I mean, you're still kind of recovering from it, but I have a feeling that we'll probably, have a quote unquote chill 6 months. And then we're going to go like, okay, let's go buy a facility. Let's go, expand the business. But the one thing that I'm probably the most excited about is, I think that within this year, we're going to be implementing some vision and AI components, which is really going to help us become more efficient. And it's something that I haven't seen in our industry. And it again, is something that in some other industries, these kind of cameras recording and making recommendations on things, it's really common in other industries. And all I did was kind of pick up the phone and say, hey, would that work for, what we're doing and what we're packing boxes for? And so I think we're going to cut a deal with somebody, and we're going to be able to offer some stuff to our clients and show our clients, and even completely change pricing in the industry and how people do things. So that's pretty exciting. But I don't know if we'll be able to have a chill 2025 and do that as well. We'll see.
worse things could happen. You acquire another facility, expand your growth. I mean, hey,
Yeah.
you could hire some people and continue to remove yourself from the business too, and go the EOS
Sure.
route.
Yep. Yep.
Paul, that was a phenomenal story. Thank you for sharing all that with us. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you,
Before I
man.
let you go, tell everyone where they can find you, where to find Bulu, and get
Yeah.
connected with you and the brand.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And what I tell people is, if you've listened and got this far by hearing me babble, yes, you can go to bulugroup.com. You can go to pauljarrett.com. But if you're really that interested, just drop me an email. I'm not hard to find. It's just paul@bulugroup.com. Maybe toss a little emoji in there so I see that. But yeah, I mean, I love to connect with people and talk shop. And even if it's just another entrepreneur, I think it's important for entrepreneurs and business owners to leave an open door for each other. So I like to allow that always.
Couldn't agree more. And check out the social media, folks, because I was on there and I was pretty surprised some of the cool brands you work with. Maybe not always the biggest brands, but definitely some really cool products that I've seen before. And it was kind of eye-opening. So also the Joyride candy, my daughters make me watch this stuff on YouTube. Now, did you know he's got the top 5 candy at Target? So I was like, all right, we'll buy a bunch of them. We'll do the taste testing. And
we do.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. Thank you so much, Paul. Great conversation to all the listeners. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. We'll catch you next time. Peace.